We love the feeling of love. We love the warm feeling we get from love. It is because it is something that calls out to our souls. It makes our souls feel as if we have found our home. We all have a desire to be loved. To love and to be loved is part of God's plan for His creation. The problem is, we don't feel worthy of that love at times. We feel like we don't measure up or that we don't deserve this type of love, that we don't deserve His love. But God fully knows us and yet still fully loves us. We are loved by a good Father. This is who I am. I am loved.
I don't know if you know this or not about me, but I like to play guitar a lot. I've been playing guitar for a pretty long time now. I started diving into music, bass, guitar, singing back when I was 15. That's actually how me and my wife met. We met on the worship team together, and now I'm 34 years old. I don't know where 20 years went, but here I am, I guess. But I love music. I love my instruments. I'm kind of a nerd, kind of a geek when it comes to it, and knowing a little more than just it's just a guitar. And so, when I went a couple years back, I went on a journey. Like I said, I've been playing for a fairly long time, and so I told my wife, I said, hey, I really want to get a really, really good guitar, one that I'd be proud of, and it would suit all the needs that I had here at the church, and just one that's had the great tone that I was looking for. And so I went on this search, on this journey, started looking around and stuff, and God bless my wife. She was sweet and passionate, just loving and patient with me, and so I told her what I wanted and what I was looking for, and she's like, well, that's a decent amount of money. And so the thing that happened for me was I want something that I could have for the rest of my life. Something it's not just kind of mediocre or whatever. It's just like something I really like. I want a guitar that one day I would want to pass on to my children if they so choose to go down the same musical journey. And so I went and picked up this thing. It's a Martin. Specifically, it's a Grand Performance Cutaway Performing Arts Series Martin, which in shorthand is a GPCPA4 because it's the 4th edition. Now, for some of you guys, you're like, okay, who cares? Even when I brought it home, my wife's like, pretty acoustic, great, sounds awesome. But for me, it was so much more, and the reason it was so much more for me was because I knew a lot about it. I knew that the top was a spruce wood. I knew the sides and the back were East Indian rosewood. I knew that with this cutaway, I could get these pretty tones where I could still have lots of room to work around on it. I knew with the analog system that it had on here, the electronics would give me the tone that I so wanted when I would play here at the church or wherever. And so it became a passion for me. But for my wife, it's a guitar. It's just a guitar. But for me, I knew so much about it, and because I was kind of, to be really frank with you guys, I was kind of obsessed with this pursuit. This I was looking for this, and then I found it, and I love the tone of it. I love the way it sounds, plays, all that, and so it kind of reminds me a little bit about. Put that down. Good golly, Miss Molly. It kind of reminds me a little bit of our conversation last week, when we started talking about this idea of I am known. The other part of this is what I want to speak from today, and it's still found in Psalms 139. Last week we talked about that, oh Lord, you have searched me and you know me. And it starts to go into all this beautiful detail about, you knew when I was formed in my mother's womb, you knew every part. It was all part of your story and plan. Like, you knew every little detail along the way. And what's scary about that is for me personally, when I think about this idea of being known, it's kind of it's a scary thought. We talked about it last week, even with Adam and Eve, and the first thing that happened was when they bit into whatever that fruit was. It probably wasn't an apple. No one's been tempted by an apple in all of the human history. Nobody cares about apples. So it's probably something else. I don't know what. Maybe pomegranate. Who knows? Anyways, so it was on a tree, and they ate it. And when they ate it, they hid it in shame, because all of a sudden they were aware of their fallenness, their brokenness. They were aware of themselves, and they realized that they were vulnerable, that they were exposed, that they could be seen or known, and they hid. And so, and the flip side of this is it's because of fear. And so, what we see now is when we are known, we a lot of times equate with this with vulnerability and exposure, that we're vulnerable. Knowledge it's sometimes a scary thing when the knowledge you want people to know about. But we see over in Psalms 139, if you skip down after he starts talking about, I know everything about you, the good, bad, everything in between. And if you pop down to verse 17, it says, how precious. In one translation, it says, how precious are your thoughts toward me. How precious are your thoughts toward me, O God. How vast is the sum of them. How vast is the sum of them. If I would count them, there are more than the sand. I awake and I'm still with you. And this idea of that God, he knows every little detail, like I know about this guitar, and he still loves us. The problem is for often we these two things don't always translate in our lives. We feel this idea that we want to be loved or seen or known, but we're afraid to be fully known, seen, loved, because of fear of inadequacy, fear of not measuring up, fear of not being enough. Like, if you really saw, if you really truly knew me, if you really saw every part of me, I wouldn't be worthy of love. Like, you would see the bad parts of me, and you would know that the fallen, broken parts of me aren't worthy to be loved. And really, to have love, like, let's say we just have this ethereal love, like just a love out there, but not have knowledge. It's a superficial love, isn't it? It's like maybe with a celebrity, like, I just love that celebrity, but you actually don't know that person, and it's superficial. And it's like, if you possibly got to know them, maybe you wouldn't have the same feelings about them. And we kind of also put that on ourselves at times. It's like, well, if they actually knew me, they would know that I'm not worthy of love. And so we put up these false selves, if you will. So to have love without knowledge is this superficial. But the other part of this is to have knowledge, or to be known, without the love component. There lies fear. Fear is this vulnerability that you would know things about me, but you wouldn't have the love to go along with it. It's a scary place to be. There's a lot of fear there, and it reminds me of 1 John. If you guys got your Bibles, you can turn over there. If you guys got your phones, you can also open up your phone. If you don't have the Bible app, you can download the Bible app. You can have the phone, the Bible with you everywhere you go. So try that. But 1 John in chapter 4, it says this. This is one of those verses that are quoted a lot. We hear it quite often. If you're not familiar with it, 1 John in chapter 4 and verse 18, it says, "Perfect love casts out fear." And we've heard that a lot, and we use it in kind of like in the sense of if I'm scared, if I'm in a moment of terror, or if like there's something going on, that if I just have perfect love, I won't be afraid anymore. But really the context here is all about this idea of love. And it literally says that there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, for fear has to do with punishment. The context here is not fear outside of there. It's actually a fear towards our Heavenly Father. It's actually fear towards this idea of being fully known and exposed. And so we come in with this false self, this person that we think, this one's the one that deserves to be loved. The version of Mike that is funny, the version of Mike that is likable, the version of Mike that knows his stuff, like this well put together version of Mike, this is the one that's worthy to be known. But really, this other part of me, I don't want people to know it. And the reason is because of this same idea of fear of punishment, fear of being exposed, and that I might be vulnerable to attack. But what it says here is, but perfect love casts out fear. Fear has to do with punishment. And whoever fears has not been perfected in love. So now what this is saying is, if you actually knew the love of the Father toward you, you wouldn't be afraid to be known. That we already are fully known. And these parts of us that we have such a hard time with, shortcomings, the brokenness, the things in our story and our journey that we have so much shame around, God actually wants to heal those areas in our life. God actually wants to heal those broken pieces in our life. And the reason is because he loves us so much. He knows everything about us, and he loves us. We are fully known, every part, fully known, and yet he still fully loves. He fully loves us. It reminds me of a story found in the book of Luke. That's in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are the stories and the accounts of when Jesus walked on this earth. Matthew, Mark, then Luke, and it's a parable. It's a story that Jesus told in Luke chapter 15, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's a pretty popular passage of Scripture, and there's even apparently a show on right now called The Prodigal Son. It's the parable that Jesus shares called The Prodigal Son, and it reminds me of sometimes of the place that I've been, where I just have a lot of shame and because of something I did. If you're not familiar with the story, Jesus starts to share this parable. He actually shares the parable of a lost coin and a lost sheep, and now he equates it back to this idea of lost son, which is so cool and so beautiful about this same thing. We're going to share a little bit about it next week. This idea that it's this complete thought. There's something complete in there, and so he shares the story of the lost sheep, then the lost coin, and then he completes it with the story of the lost son, the prodigal son. And the story on it is a son goes to his father for his inheritance, and he goes to his father and says, "Hey, I want my part, and I want to go do with it what I will." And so he goes, his father, which is just crazy, because inheritance only comes when somebody passes, when somebody dies. And he's essentially in this even this posture, this position to say to his father, "Hey, give me my part." It's like I'm basically saying, "You're better off dead to me. Like I don't need any part of you." To completely reject his father, and he went off and he squandered his inheritance, and then it says he was he's going and trying to find work and sustenance and he ends up like eating in a pig trough. And while he's there in this parable, the story, he all of a sudden it's like, my father's house, even the servants have it better than this. I wonder if I wrote him a really nice letter, like an apology note, like, "Father, forgive me. I have sinned against you. Father, forgive me. I've really messed up. Maybe then I can be put into a position, not as a son, but just as a worker." And he actually says the statement, it's like, "I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." That just breaks my heart as a father. That breaks my heart. Because at what point were we ever worthy? At what point were we ever good enough to be called a son or a daughter? It's only position. And so what ends up happening is he goes home, and this is what I so love about this. This is why it's so rich. It says in verse 17, But when he came to himself, when the son comes to himself and he says, oh my gosh, I got to get back home. He starts writing the letter, he starts heading home. And this is the response. And this is, once again, you guys got to remember the context. Jesus is sharing this story and it's just blowing people's minds. Like the father, it actually says when the son was afar off, when the son was even far away, he was overcome with compassion. He started running towards him. I'm sure the crowd would just be like, are you kidding me? The father ran. Yeah, that's the love of the father, that he would run to us. And it actually says, very interesting. He says that he sees him afar off. The father sees him in part of verse 20. Father saw him, felt compassion, and then we see these attributes. He ran, and he embraced him, and he kissed him. He ran, he embraced him, and he kissed him. And then he starts to go into his speech, and he's like, I'm not worthy. And then the father, he doesn't even acknowledge what the son's saying. He's like, go get the fatted calf, like we're gonna party. And actually it says that he put a robe on him, he put a ring on him, and he put shoes on him. And it's just this same beautiful picture of the Father's love and pursuit for us. And if we could just sit for a second and know that we are fully known and we are fully loved. That the parts and those things that we're like, oh God, I messed up again. That the Father doesn't even acknowledge that he's just so happy that you're back home, because a good father just loves his child so much. This is something that's transformed my life, because I truly believe if we just know how loved we are, it would transform the way that we do life. If we could just sit in this position of, I am so loved, that God knows me, those parts that I don't want anybody to find out about, I don't want anybody to know about, that he knows all of them, and he still loves me. That this could transform the way that we see people. This could transform the way that we see humanity. This will, but more importantly, just that we could just sit in his love, that we could just be in his love, that he's so obsessed with us. Back to Psalms 139. That it actually says that his thoughts towards us outnumber the grains of sand on the seashore. His thoughts towards us are good. And we are always on his mind. He's constantly thinking about us. He can't stop thinking about us. And this idea that it's me. He thinks about Mike. He thinks about me all the time. And it makes me so love him. When I just know how loved I am so loved. Word Connection groups, brothers and sisters, if we could just sit in this, just be loved. You are so loved. That God sees every part of us and he loves us. You are so loved. That it's not by your merit, it's not by working, it's not by trying any longer. It's just by position. It's just by, I'm his son. I'm loved. I'm loved by the Father. And if we could just get that in our hearts, I think we would start to see people a lot different. Because here's the thing, love thinks. Love dwells. Love thinks about the best of people. Love just it has capacity and space in our mind, and then love acts, and that's what the Father did for us. Is we're constantly on his mind, and he did whatever he could to reconnect us back with him. You are loved. I pray this week that you guys have an awesome discussion around this idea. And that it really hits your soul, it really hits your heart, that we could just sit in this idea that you are loved, that you don't have to perform any longer, that you're just like the prodigal son, you were never really worthy because of what you did. It's just because of who you are. You're his. I love you guys. I pray this week that just becomes more of a revelation for us and that we can sit in that position. I pray that your guys' conversation is productive, open, honest, and that it's a genuine conversation. Love you guys. We'll see you next week.